Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. And first things first, I am very happy that I now have all my routes that I owned in Train Sim World 2 in Train Sim World 3. Finally, London Underground, Bakerloo Line, and the Sandpatch Grade and the Schnellfahrstrecke Köln-Aachen arrived. So even the Train Sim World 2 core routes are here now. What a nice thing to happen. Now I can use everything that I was able to use in Train Sim World 2. Hey AJ, how are you doing? I hope it is not too late for you. I promise it won't be a 4-hour stream tonight. I'm not trying to do anything with ethanol loading or stuff. We're just doing a nice quick, or not really quick, but a nice not too long stream about PZB, and especially I wanted to throw a closer look on the release functionality in PZB, and for that I use, as I often do, the Dresden Nahverkehr DLC. Why always the Dresden Nahverkehr? Because it has so many opportunities to use the signaling and the PZB constellations, and I have not found that on a different DLC in that way that we have it on Dresden. And yeah, that's what I want to do. And I picked a service, Regionalbahn 31, from Großenhain to Coswig. We have to use the Talent 2 again. Again, this is a choice that makes sense because it has an MFD display in the cab that allows us to see a lot what is happening. We get those text messages so we can see why and for what and when we get that Zwangsbremsung and stuff. Congrats on getting all your routes. Thank you very much. It's not something actually that I have to be proud of. It is something that the people at Dovetail support and the people at Epic Game Store support finally figured out. Well, I have been suggesting that it might have something to do with the giving away the Train Sim World 2 game for free on Epic Game Store last year, and it might have something to do with bundles like the Season Pass last year, and maybe that was the reason why it took so long to get all the entitlements together. But no, actually it worked, and every time everything or things can be sorted out, it is a good thing. So, RB 31 Großenhain Coswig, we're starting at 7 in the morning. I won't rush it. Well, maybe I'll rush it, does not matter. We turn on to set up our train the CIFA and the 2 PZB switches. Then we can turn on the train and open the doors. I always like to switch the displays to the dark mode because it is less annoying for my eyes. Lights are at marker lights. Wipers we do not need. Can already set the reverse to forward. And then the train is already set up. The pantograph is up. The main circuit breaker is closed. We're not getting any current from the overhead catenary. This is why we have this purple icon with the strike through the kilonewton symbol. But this will change as soon as we close the doors. Then this symbol here will change, and we can see that we can draw power from the overhead catenary. Damn, who's up at 7 in the morning? We are to do some train driving. Close the passenger doors. Doors are closed and you can see the symbol vanished, and everything is set to go. We have still some air in the brake cylinders, 2 bars. This is always the standard value that we have as long as the combined power and brake handle is at 0. As soon as I move it to 5%, this amount goes out and we can start. We're starting with a PZB start program, like a restricted 1000 Hertz. The signal that we are getting is an HL signal, steady green over steady yellow, meaning that we have to go 40 now and then we can go to line speed. This is why we are allowed to release. First time that we released. Why we were allowed to release at this situation, we will talk about it a bit later in the presentation part. Now we are at our 40 that the signal tells us. 40 now, clear later. We cannot go with a 10 here, not until the whole train is across the switches. What happens fast, because we only have one train with 3 cars, it is already across the switches and we can accelerate. Oops, that was the wrong key. Sit down again. Use the Tempomat to accelerate. If you don't have a problem with the fact that the Tempomat is using a lot of power to accelerate, as you can see, it just turns it to the max more or less and then releases as soon as the speed is closing into the 100. You can accelerate with the Tempomat. If not, then you have to be a bit more cautious, do it manually or set the Tempomat to a lower value and increase it later. I advise doing this when you're running downhill, for example. If you run downhill and use the Tempomat just to set it to the speed that you want to go, then you are most probably in for overspeeding 1 or 2 clicks, because the Tempomat will accelerate and then it will just close the power too late. But if you are on even ground or even going uphill, then you can totally do it like this. It works. Now we are at line speed 100 and we have to be on the lookout what signals that we are getting. Even at 7 in the morning we have to be cautious, and we see, oh my god, we are running on a yellow signal, a steady yellow, telling us there is a red one up ahead. We will have to acknowledge the 1000 Hertz magnet that is at the signal, like now. We have to slow down to 80 and the PZB regime to comply with the 1000 Hertz monitoring within 23 seconds. And then we have to get ready for the 500 Hertz in front of the red signal. Soon as we hit the 500 Hertz magnet, we must not go faster than 60. If we go faster than 65, we will get the Zwangsbremsung as soon as we hit the 500 Hertz. We can already see the red signal in front, so we can bring the speed down even more. You can see we got the 500 Hertz monitoring. Train tells us the 500 Hertz is monitoring us to 45, meaning 40 for us if we calculate our margin of error. And then we are at the signal. And what is there to do for us? We can creep to the signal, hope that it gets cleared. Since we are already so slow, you saw that our monitoring is now to 25 kilometers. That means we are already in the restricted 500 Hertz monitoring. And then we have to stop our train and wait. As soon as the signal gets switched to green, we can start again, but As you know, the train won't know that the signal is green. It will stay in the 500 Hertz monitoring. It will stay in the restricted 500 Hertz monitoring. So we will have to creep up to the signal with 20. And we have to wait for all the monitorings to end. Maybe we can release after that, but we will still be condemned to a very slow speed even after the signal has turned to green. So now our signal is still in the red, but it totally was possible that the signal turned already to green and we start our train now, and we lost a lot of time with all those regulations, with all those limitations, with the stopping, with the starting in the monitoring and so on, and this can actually be quite a hindrance for running as many trains as possible in as little time as possible. So what do you do? Now it actually switched. What do? We can release our brakes. This takes time. We can apply some throttle. Yeah, you can see we are limited to 60 here, but it is a white one. We don't have to acknowledge the white one, but we still have to adhere to the 20 reduction from the restricted 500 Hertz, and even after passing the signal it does not end. Usually it ends after passing the signal, because then you traveled a distance long enough. Here it doesn't. I'm not super sure if this is prototypical. It might be, because sometimes there is a bit of tolerance in the distances. Now it ended. We are back to a restricted 1000 Hertz with the yellow lamp already off, so we can release from that, because we got a signal that told us you can go 60 and then back to line speed. So we can accelerate again. That was only the CIFA. And drive into the main track across the switches. The switches are actually the reason why we got slowed down to 60. Those switches are limited to 60. And then we can stop at the station. Yeah, this is the way to do it with stopping at the red signal. It was not so bad, because the signal stayed red for quite some time. But this can be annoying if you just stop, and then the moment you stop the signal turns green. And you have to start your train with all this stuff and all the limitations. So this is why the PZB regime has a functionality that allows you to release. We have done this twice already in this short service. We released from the starting program, we released from the 1000 Hertz after we passed the signal that was green now. I wanted actually to have a look at the circumstances under which releasing is allowed, is possible, and makes sense. Those three things are not always necessarily the same. You have always to check when it is technically possible to release, then you have to see when it is actually allowed to release according to the operating rules, and the third thing is, when does it make sense to release. And I took this graphic here that looks a bit confusing. It is from the Wikipedia site, from the Punktuelle Zugbeeinflussung PZB. This is the source for it if you want to look it up. And if you can't read what is written here in the drawing, don't worry, it is in German anyway. So we will have a closer look at this as we talk about it. It is Betriebsprogramm der PZB 90, that means that is the operating program of the PZB version 90. That is an updated version that was introduced in the 90s and is used on German trains now. What we have here represents the values of PZB O. That is why Zugart O, train mode O, or train type O. And for PZB M and PZB U, it's more like the same with different values. You know that already from the streams that we had. So what does this confusing thing here tells us? We have here on the Y coordinate the speed that the train can travel without getting a penalty brake. 0 is at the bottom, 160 is at the top. You know that PZBO trains are limited to 160. As soon as they are going faster than 165, they get a Zwangsbremsung anyway. This is why this graphic is from 160 to 0. On the X coordinate, we have the 0 here and the 1,250 meters there. This is actually the distance that the train travels after passing the 1000 Hertz magnet. So let's put some things that we can grasp underneath. So this is our track, this is our train. We have here the 2000 Hertz, and this symbol means this is the main signal. This is our red signal here that we just stopped here. It is a red. I used KS signals because they are the most modern in Germany, and I put this mast sign on it to show that it is a main signal. Only main signals can be red, at least compared with distant signals that can only be yellow and green. Only the main signals can be red. So this is why I have a main signal here. And this is usually put up in a distance of approximately 1000 meters, 1 kilometer, between the red signal with a 2000 Hertz magnet that secures it and the Vorsignal, the distance signal that is here at, well, distance 0. And here is the 1000 Hertz magnet. So this is the situation that we all know. We have the distance signal. We just saw it in our service with the yellow light. It was not a KS signal in our service, but this does not matter. It has the export that denotes it as a distance signal, and it is secured with a 1000 Hertz magnet. This is where we have to acknowledge, and this is where we have to stop because it is the red signal. And if we don't stop, then we run the 2000 Hertz magnet, and the 2000 Hertz magnet is the executor, and it will stop our train, and then the train will come to a stop somewhere behind the red signal within the so-called Durchrutschweg, the distance that the train needs to be stopped after the 2000 Hertz magnet. We have the 500 Hertz somewhere here, and you can see the distances. Distance O is where the 1000 Hertz magnet is. Then after approximately approximately 750 meters, we have the 500 Hertz. Then there is a distance of approximately 250 meters between the 500 Hertz and the red signal. And then you can see there is this distance of 250 meters more after the red signal that is secured here, where the monitoring goes on. The 1000 Hertz monitoring goes on beyond the red signal. This will be important for understanding stuff that we want to look at later. So the first thing that the train has to adhere to when it gets to the 1000 Hertz magnet is that you have to adhere to this brake curve here, right? So we have already learned in the streams before that we have 23 seconds to slow down our speed from whatever speed we are traveling to under 85. We have to go to 80 to have a margin of error. Right? And what I have not told you then is that you are not in the situation where after 23 seconds after hitting the 1000 Hertz magnet, the PZB system just checks if you are below the 85, but you're actually controlled within this declining brake curve. So at every point here, you are checked if you are slowing down properly. If you're not, if you are above it, then you will get stopped. Yeah, see, you already know that you have a very short short amount of time to hit your Wachsamkeitstaste to acknowledge that your train hit the 1000 Hertz magnet, right? And it is given with 4 seconds here in this diagram. Actually, it is usually shorter. On modern trains, it is 2.5 seconds. Within, you have to hit the vigilance key, and then this is what your indicators will show in your train. The yellow 1000 Hertz lamp will light up, and the 85 indicator will start flashing. Then you know, okay, your train acknowledged you hitting the vigilance key, and now this monitoring works. So you have to bring down your speed to the 80 within the 23 seconds and not violating this brake curve. After 700 meters traveled since the 1000 Hertz magnet, right, the yellow lamp will come off. This is here 700 meters and the yellow lamp will come off. The 85 will still be flashing. And this is the situation where technically it is possible to release from the monitoring here. The thing is, if you're running up to a red signal, then at the 500 Hertz magnet, you will get the 500 Hertz influencing and the 500 Hertz monitoring, and this is this curve here in our diagram. Yeah. So between this point here and this point here, you're actually not controlled according to the brake curve, but this is where the system trusts the driver to be at beyond or below 65 as soon as he hits the 500 Hertz magnet, right? And if he doesn't, then he will get the Zwangsbremsung as soon as he hits the 500 Hertz magnet. So this is the usually, well, the monitoring and the brake curve that you have to respect after hitting a 1000 Hertz magnet, then hitting a 500 Hertz magnet, and then you have to more or less stop in front of the red signal according to your own discretion. You just can't run it. If you run it, the 2000 Hertz magnet will stop you. This is the normal sequence. This is what we did just in our service. And the release, the Freitaste, the release key is something that comes in only in this distance here. After 700 meters traveled since the 1000 Hertz magnet and the yellow lamp coming off, telling you now you can release. Now it is technically possible to release. The problem is, if you release at this point and you're running up to a red signal, as soon as you hit the 500 Hertz magnet, well, first, before we hit the 500 Hertz magnet, this indicator with the 85, it will become solid after hitting the release key. It stops flashing. It will be solid again, telling you, okay, the train acknowledged that you hit the release key. But then you hit the 500 Hertz magnet, and then, because with the releasing, you suppress all this controlling here, but as soon as you hit the 500 Hertz magnet, the suppressed, yeah, I can see that, the suppressed monitoring will come alive again, and then bam, did you all see my nice animated flash? You will get a Zwangsbremsung. This is why I showed the S indicator that is always lighting up if your train is applying a penalty brake. So this was a case actually where you were technically in a position where you could release, but you were not allowed to release because you were running into a 500 Hertz influencing, and that resulted in a penalty brake because the signal is still red, so there was no point in releasing. This is why actually you are allowed to release only if the signal speed ahead that you can see is 30 kilometers. It is bigger than 30 kilometers per hour, and you do not have to expect another 500 Hertz or 1000 Hertz influencing within the next 550 meters. Why 550 meters? This is exactly the distance from the 700 meters after the 1000 Hertz until you hit the 1250 meters where the monitoring ends. So just go one step back. Releasing leads to the monitoring being suppressed, but it will run hidden until you traveled the 1250 meters from the 1000 Hertz magnet. Right? And you can't see it, but you're still monitored, and if you released in a situation where you were not supposed to release, then you will get a Zwangsbremsung. If you're released and in the next 550 meters you hit an active 500 Hertz magnet, you will get stopped so that you do not run the red signal. So where does it make sense to release then? If you want to read it up, actually here is the number of the directive of the DB Netz AG, where you can actually read it up when releasing is allowed. So you can see this is a new slide, number 2. We put our train back a little. Where is it? Where does it start? Here. We put it back. We go back into a situation where we have acknowledged the 1000 Hertz magnet at the yellow signal here. And you already traveled 700 meters and the yellow light came off. Then you can release. The train is here now, and you see the red signal, and you think, okay, technically I can release, but it does not make any sense. I'm not allowed to release because I will hit the 500 Hertz magnet very soon, and then I will get the Zwangsbremsung. And so I don't release. But if the signal switches, turns to green, when I'm here, like now it is green, then the magnets here, the 2000 Hertz magnets and the 500 Hertz magnets, actually are inactive now. This is why they are only white and not black. Then it totally makes sense to release, because now I can go back to line speed of 160 maybe and be faster, and I don't have to go all the way to the 1250 meters until the monitoring to 85 ends. So this is where I hit the release key and end the monitoring and can go on. And now the 500 Hertz magnet is not active, nor is the 2000 Hertz magnet, and I can accelerate back to line speed. Maybe we can actually try and see how this looks in the game. For that, we just restart the service that we have been playing. And just try to be a bit late at this red signal, so that it makes sense to release at a certain point. Oh, thank you for that. The presentation is off. So, we are back in our Talent 2 Baureihe 442 train in Großenhain by Cottbus. Oh, we can see that the marker lights are on this train. This is not as it is supposed to be. We turn on the train, we switch on the CIFA and the PZB dark mode for the displays, and open the doors so that the passengers can get into the train. What still is left for us to do? Neutral. Let's see if we're still. No, the marker lights are correct now. Maybe we actually turn on the headlights because it is still a bit dark. This is the branch line in the Dresden DLC that leads us from Priestewitz to Großenhain. I might have mentioned that I'm totally passionate about branch lines in route DLCs. That adds so much more in terms of immersion and possibilities that you have if you have routes that not only go from A to B and from B to A, but they branch. So close the doors, or we can do it from here. This is the door close button if someone is interested to know. Doors are closed. The traction lock sign got off. 2 bars in the brake cylinders. We can empty the brake cylinders and we can start our journey. Train is moving. Can see the PZB start program kicking in. Let's just check. Okay, HL signal, steady green over steady yellow, 40 now, clear later. That means we are allowed to release from the starting program, but still have to respect the 40 until we are across the switches. That sound was the CFA. As soon as I got close to the 40, I hand over to the Tempomat and let the Tempomat take the train out of the station and across. The sign that tells us from here we can go 100. I'm still dawdling a bit, so that later we can actually release in front of our signal that we're running in. So I'm accelerating very moderately and not just increasing the speed in one go to 100. Maybe it's actually nicer for the passengers. So just 5 kilometers per hour steps until we are at our line speed of 100 here. The cows in the fields are up too. People already have their lights on. German trains don't honk when they cross level crossings. And now we have to be on the lookout for what the signal is telling us. We know from our route knowledge, because every train driver has the route knowledge about the routes that he is traveling on, that there will be a signal at the next bend. And we need to be on the lookout what it tells us. And oh, it is a yellow signal. That means we have to slow down to 80 after or even to 60 until we hit the 500 Hertz. We can already bring down our speed. And because I want to get into a situation where I can release, this is the acknowledge and the 1000 Hertz. As you can see, the yellow lamp is lit. We are controlled to 85 right now. And we know that the signal that we are running up to is at the bridge that we see here in front of our train. So to get into a situation where we can release before we hit the 500 Hertz magnet, because as soon as we hit the 500 Hertz magnet, are in a 500 Hertz monitoring, we cannot release anymore. So we have to get into a position where the yellow lamp goes off and we have not yet passed the 500 Hertz magnet. This is why I'm going down so slow now. And we have to be careful not to go beyond the or below the 10 kilometers per hour, because then we will go into a restricted monitoring. So this is why I chose 15 kilometers per hour. And I don't know if you can see it on the stream. I already can see it that the next signal is red at the bridge. The CFA is active. We have to be wary about the CFA. And now I am just crawling towards the red signal. Between here and the red signal there will be the 500 Hertz, and as soon as we hit the 500 Hertz magnet, this light will turn to red and then we cannot release anymore. At the moment we cannot release because the yellow light is still on. So maybe we will come into a situation where the yellow light comes off and we have not yet hit the 500 Hertz magnet, so that we will be able to release. Now the yellow lamp has gone off. Now we are technically in a position where we can release from this monitoring. But since the signal is still red, this magnet here, you can see the magnet, the 500 Hertz, is still active. So if we release now and hit the magnet, then we will get stopped with a Zwangsbremsung. I had to slow down even more. This is why we are now controlled to 45, not 85, because we now dropped into a restricted mode. And restricted mode will be covered in the next stream on Sunday, most probably. But just as much, if you are traveling too slowly, then you will go into restricted mode, or if you stop. But this does not matter. We can release from a restricted mode just the same way that we can release from a non-restricted mode. I just want to see the signal turn green before we hit the 500 Hertz magnet, so that we can release. Will we be able to do it? Just stop the train in front of the 500 Hertz magnet, so that I am able to release. Well, you see, this is actually not a situation where it is really necessary to release, but I want to show the mechanism anyway. Signal is still red. Or is this actually a scripted situation where the signal does not turn? Now it turned to green. We have not yet passed the 500 Hertz. Here, this is the 500 Hertz magnet. You can see it actually has a label telling us that it is a 500 Hertz magnet, and this is what it looks from close. And here is the thingy. I don't know if you can see it because it's a bit difficult with the light. This is the thingy where the train picks up the signal from this 500 Hertz magnet, and it has not yet passed, so we don't have the 500 Hertz monitoring. And this is why we can release. So I hit the release key. Let's do it on the keys that we actually have in the train here. And now all the yellow stuff vanished, right? And now we can go on without any PZB limits. Only thing that we have to do is to stick to the 60 limit that is ordered by this signal here. It is a green signal telling us, okay, we can go on, but we have to stick to 60 until we are through the switches. And it was not so super necessary in this situation here, but you can obviously see that if the signal switches to green earlier, then it is totally not necessary to stop the train at all. Oh yeah, I can get out of the train. I use the external camera, but I can get out of the train. This is why these trains in the world, because you can run around in the world. Now we're going out of the across the switches, and this is our stop at the station here. And obviously we are now late because we did all the presentation and the explaining, so we are totally behind timetable, but this is not so important. So let's stop here. People are waiting. We can just check if everything is okay and then open the doors. Let's see if anyone gets in. No, actually people are so disciplined that they first let people get out of the train before they get onto the train. Yeah, especially on shunting services. When you have to couple cars and uncouple cars and set the switches, then you can get out of the train and do that yourself if you don't want to employ Henk, the freight conductor. So let's see how much of this time we can get back on our route to Coswig. Oh, I just see that the passenger information system is not working. There's a Henk. Yeah, but I have to admit that only AJ and me have Henk. In the original game, Henk is only called external camera 3A. So we are still in the limit of 60 until we are across the switches. Well, you'd call it a cap usually. And there are different versions. What I wanted to do is to set our passenger information system, because obviously on this train it is not working. First bring the train with the Tempomat to line speed 120, and then you can see here the passenger information system says RB31, but it does not say where we are going, so we can see if we can find, yeah, Dresden. No, we are going to Coswig, right? There is Coswig. Aha! Now everything is good. Normally you should not do this when running, but when you're preparing the train before you take it into service. And now we are in the burn phase to Niederau. Just make sure that we do not run into any adverse signals. We have to press the CFA vigilance system, or the key for this system, every now and then. But apart from that, we have 5.6 kilometers where nothing has happened. Track signs are here, trackside signs. Those signs with the stripes tell you there will be a distance signal coming up. This one, the X, denotes this signal as a distance signal. But since it is just green, we can go on without having to do anything. Those funny signs with the numbers on it, they are the so-called hectometric signs. They always tell you where you are on the track. We are at kilometer 91 point, what is it, 8. So they are put up in a distance of approximately 200 meters between them. And this makes it easier for you to know where you are and how close you are to the next station and the next signal and stuff. There's a train coming from the opposite direction. It is a Baureihe 143 locomotive with the Dosto cars that are typical for German regional trains. Yeah. Running into the sun looks great. Don't worry, this yellow is not for us, the green is for us. In Germany, signals are usually on the right side of the track, not on the left. Sometimes they are on the left, if there is no room on the right. But then you will know. Now I missed my brake point a bit with all the explaining, so I will have to do some harsh braking to get the train to a stop at the next station. That will be okay, but this was a harsh brake application. The old folks on the train will complain about that later, I'm afraid. But since we are behind schedule, they have to accept that. Just check if everything is okay on the platform. If so, open the doors. On the correct side, preferably. And while people are boarding and stuff, I want to bore you with the second part of the presentation. Because we have looked at the situation when we are running up to a red signal. Let's just check the situation, how it works with the monitoring and the releasing. If we are not running up to a red signal, but to a flashing green with a white number that tells us that from this signal on we are restricted to a certain speed. Just like the 6 that we saw in our service, let's have a 7 here telling us that we are restricted to 70 from here. The 1000 Hertz magnet at this signal will not be on because we are not supposed to stop here, and we are supposed to pass the signal, but just are supposed to be slow at 70. This is why the 2000 Hertz magnet will be off. We won't get the yellow signal in advance, but we will get a flashing green that tells us to go 70 as soon as we hit the main signal. This is why we have a 7 in yellow. Yellow advance, white definite. That is the general principle in German signaling. So we pass this distance signal, this 4 signal, a flashing green. It is called a KS1 signal, the green signal here, with this yellow 7 next to it. It is called a ZS3V signal, showing a 7. Signal tells us we have to slow down from whatever speed we're traveling. Maybe it is 160 because line speed is 160. We have to slow down within the distance of 1 kilometer between the distance signal and the main signal. And therefore the 1000 Hertz magnet here is on, and the 500 Hertz magnet obviously is off because we are not approaching a red signal and we are not approaching a speed limit of below 40, so the 500 Hertz magnet will be off at this. So all this here will not be on the agenda because those magnets are not off. We will not go into a 500 Hertz monitoring in this situation, but what we will have is the monitoring from the 1000 Hertz. We will be controlled if we slow down accordingly in this distance between the Vorsignal and the Hauptsignal, the distance signal and the main signal. And we have to acknowledge that we saw this incoming reduction in speed to 70 by pressing the Wachsamkeitstaste, the vigilance key, within the 2.5 seconds on modern trains, 4 seconds on oldish trains. And then, just like we have seen this before, the 85 indicator starts flashing and the yellow 1000 Hertz will come on. After 700 meters traveled, the yellow lamp will come off, just as we have seen. The 85 is still flashing, and then we can release. Then it is technically okay to release by hitting the release key, the Freitaste. And if we are allowed to do this, we have to check our rules when it is allowed to release. Signal speed greater than 30 kilometers per hour and no 500 Hertz or 1000 Hertz influencing within the next 550 meters. And we look at our signal, 70, okay, it is greater than 30. No 500 Hertz, 500 Hertz is off. No 1000 Hertz, no 1000 Hertz magnet in our way, we can release. So we hit the Freitaste, we release, the 85 becomes steady, and the monitoring is suppressed. So this is a situation where it is technically possible to release, where we are allowed to release, but if you look at the speeds here, now we are controlled to 85, we have to be at 70 at this signal. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to release here. It is possible to get all this monitoring out of the way. Technically, you could just accelerate here to 90 in this short distance and slow down to 70 again, but this does not make sense to perform a stunt like this on the remaining on the remaining 300 meters in front of the signal. So typically there is no point in releasing here. It can make sense to release here if you imagine you are not in PZB mode O, but you are traveling with a freight train in PZB mode M or U. We have looked at those modes too, and you know you are not controlled to 85 then, but to 70 or 55 even on PZB U. And then it can make sense. If you are running a PZB U train, are controlled to 55 here, running with 50 at this point, approaching a 70 signal, then it totally makes sense to release so that you can go back to the speed of 70 before you pass the signal. Then you can just start accelerating earlier and get to your destination a bit more early. And it is always better to get the trains home early, because then you can run more trains, and running more trains means running more freight, and running more freight means earning more money. So this is a situation where you're not running up to a red signal but to a speed reduction, and where releasing is possible. But it can be tricky. Let's look at situation 4, and this is the last slide that I have prepared. We have again our track. We have now speed reduction to 90 at this point here. And now let's make it a bit different. We put this downward pointing yellow triangle at the signal, telling us it is not only a main signal but also functions as a distant signal for the next main signal. That is not longer on my slide, but that will be the next main signal on the track. We have not covered this yet, but we will cover it in a stream about the KS signaling system in Germany. If you encounter a signal with masked signs like this, it tells you it is a main signal, and at the same time it is the for signal, the distance signal for the next main signal. And we put this on the signal 2. So this signal here tells you from this point on you must be below 90, and at the next main signal you will have to be below 70. This is why the signal is at the same point a main signal and a distance signal too. Distance signal telling you next signal you will be down to 70 and now to 90. And here we have a magnet that can function in two ways. It can function as a 1000 Hertz magnet and it can work as a 2000 Hertz magnet too. The 2000 Hertz magnet as long as this signal works as a main signal, and the 1000 Hertz magnet as long as this signal works as a distance signal for the 70 that is announced here. The 2000 Hertz part of the magnet is off because the signal is not red. The 1000 Hertz part is on because this yellow 7 is active. The distance signal for this signal will be like this in the KS system. You have the yellow 9 here. So passing this signal you get a warning that at the next main signal you have to be below 90, and this signal at the same time tells you on the second main signal, so the next signal, if you start counting from this signal on, you will have to be below 70. Now we have learned that passing announced speed reduction to 90 will only have an active 1000 Hertz magnet if you are traveling faster than 105 kilometers per hour. This only applies to announced speed reductions to 80 and 90. Then the 1000 Hertz magnet is only active if you are traveling faster than 15 kilometers above the announced limit. If not, then the 1000 Hertz magnet will not be on. You don't have to acknowledge, and you just can reduce your speed accordingly to the destination speed. So for the 1000 Hertz magnet to be on, we will have to assume that our train at this point is traveling with a velocity of 105 or faster, so that the 1000 Hertz magnet is on. So the 500 Hertz magnet obviously will be off because the signal is not red. So we will not be getting a 500 Hertz monitoring here. So this part of the diagram falls out of the equation. Not out of the equation again is this brake curve here starting at the 1000 Hertz magnet. The train passes the 1000 Hertz magnet. The driver has to hit the vigilance key within the 4 seconds or the 2.5 seconds on modern trains, and then the 85 indicator will start flashing, the 1000 Hertz lamp, the yellow one, will come on, and then the driver has to bring down the speed within the 23 seconds to below 85 and not violate this braking curve, just as we know it. And then after 700 meters traveled, the yellow lamp will turn off, and then it is possible to release by pressing the release key. But we have to check, is releasing allowed? If the signal speed is greater than 30, yes, it is greater than 30, it is 90. And no 500 Hertz and no 1000 Hertz influencing within the next 550 meters is to be expected. Well, no 500 Hertz is to be expected because the 500 Hertz magnet is off, because the signal is not red. But do we have to expect 1000 Hertz influencing? And then we check, yes, we are expecting 1000 Hertz influencing, because this signal is not only a main signal but also a distance signal that announces a reduction in speed limit to 70. So the 1000 Hertz part of this magnet will be active, and we will be getting 1000 Hertz influencing within the next 550 meters. This is why, according to regulations, releasing in this situation is not allowed. If the driver releases anyway, what happens? First, the monitoring, the 1000 Hertz monitoring, will be suppressed. So everything looks good, the train goes on, and now our driver thinks, okay, I am no longer controlled to below 85, I have to go 90 at this signal, so I will just speed up and bring my speed to 90 in this part of the track, and then I will go on with 90. Because I'm late, I need those extra seconds than I can gain. And then he brings the speed to 90, and when he passes the 1000 Hertz magnet, he is at 90. And now what happens? The train hits the 1000 Hertz magnet, and since we have not yet traveled 550 meters past the 700 meter mark here, and the monitoring here that monitors us and controls us to 85 has been suppressed, but is still running hidden in the background, will get active again as soon as we get 1000 Hertz influencing. And then it will get active again, and then the train checks, okay, I have to control you to 85, you are running a 90, blum, and then you get a penalty brake application at the 1000 Hertz here. So this is a situation where you can get a quite surprising penalty brake, because you're running with 90, the signal tells you 90 from here on, and still you get a penalty brake. Because the 1000 Hertz monitoring runs until 250 meters past the signal. It can only be suppressed by releasing, and as soon as you get the influencing, the monitoring will be active again and you will be controlled to 85. I have not found actually a situation in the game where I can show this, or where I can check the game if it is implemented correctly, but this is, I think, quite a funny situation. If you're running a train in PZB mode M or U, then it is obviously more, all the more possible that you can run into a situation where you accelerate beyond the 55 again, for example, and then you are getting 1000 Hertz at the next 1000 Hertz magnet and get a Zwangsbremsung because the old monitoring gets active again. That's it, what I wanted to tell you about today, about releasing, when it is technically possible, when you are allowed to do it, and when it makes sense. And next time we will look at the restricted mode, and in restricted mode you can release from restricted mode as long as you are not in a 500 Hertz monitoring, but it is, or it can be even more tricky, because in this situation here, when you hit the 1000 Hertz magnet and you released from restricted monitoring, then the restricted monitoring will come active, and the restricted monitoring will have much lower speeds that is checking your speed against, and then you are much more likely to get into a situation where you get a Zwangsbremsung at the 1000 Hertz magnet. We go back to the game and bring our train home to Coswig. You're very welcome, AJ. Unfortunately, we are so far behind our schedule that we should already be at the next station when we are just starting here. Maybe they can have some announcement. Train will be late because of the driver is explaining too much stuff to imagined people in his head. Let's see with that we get a bit less harsh application. We can see that we are running up to a yellow signal, so we will get our next 1000 Hertz monitoring there. what does not really bug us because we have to stop at that station anyway. What again you can see is how the monitoring to 85 will switch to a monitoring to 45 as soon as we stop, because stopping with a monitoring on will result in the monitoring becoming restricting. See, now it is 45. Doors. You can see signal turned to green. All the same, our PZB computer does not know that. Has to assume that the signal is still at danger. So we will have to adhere. When we start our train again, mustn't go faster than the restricted speed of 45. But as soon as the yellow lamp comes off, we can release. But this is a bit tricky in the beginning because you see all green signals and think, yeah, why can I not go? You can't, because you ran into the restricted monitoring. You have to wait until you can release, and then you can go to line speed again. Now it's off. Now you can release. Now you ended. Now you ended the monitoring. The marker is still flashing. I don't think that this is prototypical. It should be steady now. But anyway. In the background, it is running about like now. Obviously the 85 marker on this train. Now there's a reduction to 10 announced. We don't have to acknowledge that because it is 10 or higher. But nevertheless, we have to bring down our speed to 100 until we hit the next signal. Next signal is a flashing yellow. That is a HL signal telling us that we are going to a restriction of 60 or 40. We have to acknowledge that. We get 1000 Hertz. And have to bring our speed first to 80, so that we don't get a Zwangsbremsung. And then to the 60 or 40. I think it is 60 here. This is actually quite funny because the signals alone do not tell you whether you have to expect a restriction to 60 or 40, but you need to know that from your route knowledge. Now we can see the next signal, and we can see that the yellow bar at the bottom of the signal is on, so this is restricting us to 60, and the upper part of the signal is telling us we have to expect a stop. 60 now, stop later. Acknowledge, next 1000 Hertz. What does not bug us this much, because we will stop this train at Coswig anyway, because the service ends there. So we can just stop the train there and start explaining why we are so late. Now I'm using the Tempomat to get the speed down. You can see that we got another 500 Hertz monitoring, that we are in the 500 Hertz monitoring now, because we are running up to a red signal. So even if we wanted, there is no releasing from the monitoring now. Let's check the platform. If everything is clear, open the doors. And since we're done here, we can stable the train and go outside. Oh, I have to lock the doors, otherwise the service won't finish. Alright, this is the service. I return to free roam. Close the door. And with this view, maybe we want to have the view from inside the train, because we discussed this. You can not only go to the outside, because you can also go through your train most of the time. You can sit in your own train, look out of the window, even travel on the train when it is driven by AI drivers. That's all in the game. The PIS boards inside this train are not working, but there are trains where they are working actually. What never works are the toilets, but who wants a toilet simulator? Okay. With that view from the passenger's perspective from our own train, I will leave you to it. I thank you very much for staying with me. Thank you very much, AJ, for moderating. And Sunday, I think in the afternoon at 5, I will try to be back with another stream. Thank you very much. Take care.